let's just start with the introduction then. So you're Harold Floyd, you're ex-military, you came out of the military, you started Elite Force Safety, and somehow you found yourself delivering some of the most engaging and relevant manual handling training on the market, as far as I can tell. Just to introduce yourself, how did that happen?
Well, one of the things that I saw that was lacking was that training wasn't relevant enough. And in the military, when you go through any training, you have a specific training team put together, and they start low level, and then they build up the scenarios, and you sort of climax, if you like, with a big finish, which is what I think most things should be like. And what I found was that companies were going in, ticking boxes, doing the bare minimum, and just handling the cardboard boxes, take that off the floor and put it onto that desk. And I was like, this is awful. And I couldn't do it. And I thought, I can't be one of them people. We don't actually charge as much as some other companies. And I still feel guilty doing the training that we do at the moment because I actually want to help people. I'm very similar to yourself. I want to give some good advice. I actually care about health and safety, and I want to do it. So when I'm doing it now, I think it should be relevant to the people, relevant to their jobs. And even at some places where we go, we do 4 different types of training for the 4 different areas that they work in. And I think that's what I got from the military is it needs to be right, it needs to be specific. And we do annual training as well. And we try and make it as realistic. And that's what we're after. And that's what I thought we should do with EFS. And we've now branched out from there. I sort of fell into the mental health side of it because I link mental and physical. Because if you have a physical injury, it does affect you mentally. And if you're mentally suffering, you don't want to physically go out and do things. But actually, that's the one thing you should be doing is being physically active. Yeah. So I linked both of them together. And again, from the military background, seeing when I joined in 85, all the way up to me again now in 2010, the advances in the mental health support that the military guys were getting. And I went, do you know, this isn't stealing ideas or this isn't plagiarizing anything. This has been worked on. The military have used it. Why don't we bring that to industry? And that's what I thought about doing. And that's all I do now. And the only reason that I use ex-military and we only use veterans is because I know that they know what I know. So I know that they are going to pass on that same message. Whereas it'd be very hard for me to take someone who's never been in that environment and do it. And they're a great source as well. They're really good instructors. So we do that. And then now we're linking up with other people and they're bringing other courses to us and developing courses. And, you know, we're constantly looking to improve, which is something I believe should happen all the time with training. There's too many courses that are off the shelf. There you go, that'll do. I'm forever changing slides in my presentations for the better or for the worse. Try it. Now that didn't really hit the point. I'll change it again. And that goes across my subjects. And when I go out and look at other trainers, because we're all grown-ups, we do give each other advice. And I have people come and watch me. And I listen to the advice and I go, actually, yeah, you're quite right. That's a good way of putting it. So the manual handling, one of our other trainers, he saw me doing it. I went, I'd like to do it in this way if I could. And I went, do you know what? The message is the same. You're saying the same as me, just in a different order. And if that works for you, it works for you. So, you know, that's really where we started and where I've gone with it and where I want to continue going with it and permanently develop.
Okay, so there's a lot in there to unpack. I mean, first of all, is that you're not focused on the manual handling of cardboard boxes. So what I've seen from your videos is that you're manual handling lots of different things. So it could be barrels, wheelbarrows, pressure washers, hose pipes. I saw your lad doing sweeping with a broom today, which is manual handling. So you're making it very relevant to people. Now, I'll admit, when I was a health and safety manager, I never delivered manual handling training in my organizations because my experience and the data showed that there was no link between manual handling training and a reduction in manual handling injuries as far as the HSE research was concerned. And I was never surprised by that. If you're just teaching people how to lift a cardboard box, then how would that translate into a reduction in manual handling injuries? But I suspect that the way you deliver the training might actually be a bit different. If there is a type of manual handling training that actually does reduce manual handling injuries, I suspect it would look something like yours. Have you had, I mean, you've been doing this a while now, have you had any data or any even anecdotal evidence or feedback from your customers telling you, you know, over a year or 2 years after the training you've delivered, that it's actually had a positive impact on injury rates?
Yeah, I can't, for reasons I'm not allowed, I can't mention the name of the company, but I can mention the airport. So the airport was Stansted Airport, and they handle cargo. Mm-hmm. So obviously you've seen the baggage handlers, they're doing all that. And what we did is we did a trial, and the guy said to me, I want to do a trial with it to make sure this is what we want. So we went over there, we trained some of their staff, because we were going to do two things. We were going to do a training of their staff and then a train the trainer, so they become self-sufficient because they have their own training staff within the airport. So he said, but I need to, before I invest in the video and your training of the trainers, I need to make sure it works. So, okay. So we went over, we did about six or seven courses, trained the guys up. And previous to this, I can say what I want because I've not said the name of the company. Previous to this, there were a lot of people pulling the wool over people's eyes and going, oh, I've got a bad back. And bad backs were really, really bad on a Monday and on a Friday as well. And if football was on, oh yeah, there was loads of bad backs. I don't know why. And they would use it as an excuse, and they'd go, well, because I wasn't shown properly. I wasn't shown how to assemble this horse box, which is something that they do. And in freight, they have big, massive pallets. And I'm saying it's 4 times the normal standard pallet, and they're all built up and they need to be pulled off the plane. So we did the training, classroom bit, right, let's get out there. And they have a huge warehouse that's got all pallets and what's called bins, the tins, the big silver containers that are full and empty. And we did some training about pushing and pulling them and how to do all that correctly. So 6 months later, the guy said, right, we're going to go for it. I was like, why? What's happened? He said, well, we've had a 65% decrease in our lost time injuries and people going off sick. And I was like, right, okay. I said, have we saved people from injuries? He goes, if we have, then great. But if we haven't, they've got no excuse now to be pulling the wool and saying they've hurt themselves because we've given them adequate training. So I'm not sure which one you want to pull from that, Will, but it stopped what was being classed as and recorded as lost time due to MSDs.
Well, I think that's a very honest and balanced way of putting it. You're actually admitting that you're not entirely certain whether you've reduced the injuries or just reduced some people taking a mickey and using the lack of training as an excuse. But either way, that's a massive benefit, isn't it? It's a huge benefit. And you could easily just sit here and lie and say, yeah, we've had a 65% reduction in injury rate, but actually I appreciate the honesty. You know, that's what I find in, you know, because our position, you know, we're health and safety trainers, but we're also salespeople, aren't we?
Absolutely, and you need to sell your product that it works. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but at the same time, I've often felt, and I've been in and around sales for about 20 years now, because I started in financial services and I've trained salespeople, and I've often said is that if you oversell your product, it actually seems to be less credible and less believable. But if you sell your product in the sense that it said, well, it could do this and it could do that, and you could see this benefit, but you'll only see that benefit if you do it in this way. You know, if you're realistic about the potential benefits of the product, then I find you come across as a lot more credible. And what you've just said there just struck me as very, very credible. You were saying, well, listen, this is a result that we had. We're not quite sure exactly what happened, but overall the customer was happy that there was a reduction in absence. Ultimately, I wanted to ask you this. This is going to sound like a very provocative question, but you said you linked the manual handling and the mental health. You said the back injuries was like an excuse. Don't you find that a lot of people think that mental health has become the new back injury? It's the new excuse.
Oh, do you know what? That's such a weird thing that you say that. I was working with another company who were having a stand down week, and that came up 3 times in a week. That they were saying, oh, people are using it, people are going to it. I think people just don't understand with the mental health sometimes the difference between a mental health episode or a mental illness, and they're misunderstanding them. So you probably know what DOMS is, delayed onset of muscle soreness. When I was training recruits, they would often come in after they'd been on their first long run and go, oh, I've got an injury, both my legs, I can't move them. They're really stiff. And you're going, well, no, actually, is it both of them or one? Well, it was both. Right. Well, all you've got is, and they've never, ever felt that. And I think this is the things, some people are now feeling things that they don't actually know. But one of the reason I sort of got the link was when I was talking about physical injuries, and I go, anybody ever had any time off? And they go, yeah, I did. I go, how bad was it? Oh, I couldn't move. I couldn't do this. I ended on antidepressants. I started drinking heavily. And that's how I made the link. So doing the manual handling, often stories that were told to me were there was another adverse effect. And I went, yeah, and I can get that, because if I've not been to the gym, or if I injure myself, I become very frustrated with that.
Yeah, I guess some of the feedback I get from managers is that back injuries were always hard to prove. It's very hard to prove that someone's not feeling any pain. And so people could easily claim that they've got back pain and they can't move and they therefore can't come into work, and you can't really disprove it. It's a bit like whiplash, isn't it? You have a car crash, you can claim whiplash. It's very hard to disprove any of that. So you just have to accept it at face value a lot of the time. And I get managers when I'm delivering, say, IOSH training or NEBOSH training, saying to me, he says, well, like mental health issues are kind of like that. You can't prove that someone's not feeling anxious or depression or stress, and they know that you can't prove it, and they know that you have to take it at face value. And then we get these things like these duvet days and so on. It's like, well, I just don't feel up to it today, and I'm not coming into work. And companies are introducing policies which kind of encourage this a lot of the time, as part of their well-being efforts. But at the front line, the managers who've got to get the job done, and they need people to get the job done, they kind of feel like they're stuck between a rock and a hard place sometimes, because it's like, well, I can't really argue with someone if they're saying they're having a mental health day. So what do I say to that when I suspect that they're not they are fit for work, but they're just choosing not to.
I think everything is open for abuse. So you must have heard stories of people having a slip, maybe in the winter or when something's on the floor, not being that hurt, and then claiming for it. Or same with whiplash, as you just mentioned there. There are many people who will, even insurance companies, have you been involved in an accident? Did you get yourself injured? Would you like some money? So everything's open to abuse. And I think at the moment with the mental health, I think people just need to understand. And I did a week worth of this with a load of big, hairy outside workers. Didn't understand what stress was, where it came from, and how to control it. So they just use this word, I'm stressed, which really could be you're under pressure. And there's a difference between what actual stress is, which is the physical side of it, to the pressures of life. And once you explain it to them and go, and your mind controls your body. Because if you start worrying about things here, it has the adrenal gland starts to produce, and that's where the cortisol comes in. So you can control that by not thinking about it. If you can, I always like to use the word rationalize, but I always get told off by Amy for using the word rationalize. But if you can control the thoughts. So the thing with stress is, it's usually things that you can control. Stress and anxiety are very, very closely linked. And the thing with anxiety is it's you worrying about things that might happen. With stress, it's things that you can have some control over. It's a lot deeper than that, but as a quick brush over. So if you are feeling stressed, what is it that's doing it, and what can you do about it, rather than sat there wallowing over it and then leading into anxiety about the possibles? And we've all heard the people go, yeah, but what if? Well, it hasn't happened, so why worry about it at the moment?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the difference between pressure and stress. The NEBOSH and the HSE have just launched this new qualification in the last month or so. The NEBOSH HSE certificate in managing stress, I think it's called. Simple as that. It starts with definitions, like all NEBOSH courses, and the difference between pressure and stress. And they make the point in the syllabus that pressure is a good thing. It can be a bad thing. It's bad when there's too much of it, and you can also have the wrong type of pressure as well. So like bullying pressure, threats, intimidation, those would be bad types of pressure. But a good pressure would be an incentive. It could be a target. It could be encouragement, praise, something which you find meaningful, useful. Yeah, but you need some pressure to get you out of bed in the morning, to get you to do anything. But stress, the way the HSE defines stress, is that it's the adverse reaction to excessive pressures, to excessive work demands. The thing is, a lot of the things which cause stress are actually outside of the person's control. And so it's very empowering to say, focus on the things you can control and do something about it instead of wallowing about it. But when it comes to managing stress in the workplace, is that a lot of it comes from outside. It comes from the manager, it comes from the targets, the policies, the support systems, the relationships with others and so on, and then just all the other stuff that's going on in the business. And those aren't necessarily things that we can easily control. I tell you, the big issue I have with the kind of the mental health industry in health and safety at the moment is that it's so focused on the front line. It's so focused on mental health first aid and mental health awareness at the front line, whereas actually a lot of the stressors come from senior management. It's the leadership, it's the way the workplace is managed, it's the targets, it's the resources that are provided, the lack of decisions or the lack of control, or what I often find is the lack of management capability. It's managers who couldn't, have the people skills of bricks, and they don't know how to manage people, and therefore they irritate people, rub people up the wrong way, they bully people, they intimidate people and so on, or they don't tackle the relationship issues between people. So the lack of management skills is often causes a stressor. So what do you think to all of that?
Absolutely right. There are people out there go, Dave's been working for us for years. He's really good at his job. Let's make him the manager, but then give him no training at all. So if you do that, and then all he will do is he'll either go into defense mode because I don't know what to do and I need to just be aggressive, or whatever his first manager was like to him, usually very autocratic back in the day 20 years ago, he will just revert to, well, that's how they work, that's how I'm going to work. And if you don't like it, see you later. Whereas in the military, one of the things that we do is you have to be seen as that good worker first and go, he's a good lad, let's put him on his promotion course. So it's called a leadership course. You then go on your leadership course. Once you pass your leadership course and prove you're worthy of the next level, are you then promoted? And each level goes up different pressures, shall we say. So as a quick example, you have to do navigating as part of it. When you do your first one for your first promotion, you do navigating in a vehicle, because if you get it wrong, we'll just turn around and go back. When you do your one for your next one, which will be corporal, you do it you do it on foot with a load of troops behind you, because the pressure's higher, isn't it? And at this level, you are going to be leading troops. And if you get it wrong, it's not just
you're walking a long way back.
And then as you go up to the next level, you're then organising all this map reading, but you're also then putting grids in, putting routes down that you will be expecting up to like 150, 200 people to follow at night. So your responsibility is you're not map reading, you're putting together this document that will be expected to be followed, and you need to be right with it. But I think you're absolutely right with us asking people to be promoted and giving them no training at all. We're asking for trouble. And leadership, again, is something that should be learned. It isn't something that you're instantly good at. Oh, he's very good at it. Well, they've learned to be good at it. And I think it's like, I want to say it's like falling in love. You don't instantly meet someone and fall in love with them. I don't know whether you did with your wife or whatever, but it's pretty something much that happens.
Yeah, we did actually.
You have to say that. But it's something you learn and it develops, and you can get better and better at it. But without any training, you're never going to get better, unless you're like me and you, where we have this inside thing where we want to improve on everything we do. That's why we have poor management who stay poor management, and all they do is bounce from job to job to job, taking their poor management with them.
Yeah. Well, I've often found that we promote people that we like, or people that fit in with the current culture, or people who say yes, who don't argue back. We promote the yes men, if you like, or just people just reliable. So, Dave, he always gets the job done. He always turns up. He's reliable. I'll make him a manager to reward him. And so, promoting people is often seen as a reward for a job previously well done. But that's actually the wrong way of looking at it, isn't it? It's like you should promote people into those positions because they're competent to do it, or at least they have the potential. They have the aptitude to with some training to be a good manager and a good leader. And I was not a good manager when I first started out. I'm not sure I'm a good one now yet, but when I started out, I was absolutely terrible. I was very autocratic because I didn't know how to handle the tough conversations, and I was actually quite scared of having tough conversations. So what happened was I overcompensated quite a lot, and so I became more aggressive and more domineering, kind of for show, if you like. You just say, well, I'll just kind of intimidate them into submission because I have no idea what to say or how to handle this. And And I was sent on manager training a long, long time ago, and I did all kinds of other training as well, but it just taught me some really simple little techniques. I found a lot of it it was like a step-by-step strategy on how to handle a particular type of conversation, like how to give someone some feedback. It was like, well, step 1, say this, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, close with that. And that was incredibly useful. It was so easy to learn. Now, I didn't enjoy the training because it often involved a bit of role play and a bit of practice, but you can also just learn by watching some videos of people practicing it as well. I mean, if you're shy, you're an introvert, you can just watch some videos of actors going through this, and I found that incredibly beneficial. And then I could mentally rehearse the conversations in my head before having it. So, well, step 1, I'm going to say this. Step 2, I'll say that. Step 3, I'll ask this. Step 4, I'll close with that. Yeah, and just giving people some of these simple tips and techniques. It could be 1, 2, 3 days worth of training. I did a 5-day training course spaced out over 5 months. It was a leadership program. It absolutely transformed me. It really did. And now I teach that kind of stuff. Often when I do some of the safety management courses, because I find that people can't manage safely unless they know how to manage people. Yeah, so we tell people on these like IOSH managing safety courses, oh, you got to enforce the rules. And it's like, well, how? How? People don't know how to. And so you end up having conversations about, well, how do you handle that type of situation? What are you going to do? What are you going to say?
Yeah, when I do the IOSH managing safety, I say to the guys, when we do the legal side of it, I say, look, this is an easy win for you. You are the leader in this safety. So if you let yourself and your personal standards drop, then they'll see you're not doing it, then they're not going to do it. Or you walk by whilst they're doing something they shouldn't, or not wearing what they should, then they'll go, oh, that was all right, I got away with that. Well, his standards aren't that high. But safety is an easy win. And the reason safety is an easy win, in a very similar way to mental health is an easy win as a manager, no matter what your style is, it shows you care. Because if you're looking out for their safety and you're looking out for their mental well-being, they'll go, he's a good guy. Yeah, he actually cares because he's just said to me, and it has to be, you're right, the conversations have to be, oi, put your glasses on now, otherwise you can't be like that. It has to be, are your glasses all right? Are they broken? No. Is there a reason why you've not got them on then? Do they not fit properly? No. All right. If you could just wear them because it'll save any eye problems. Okay, yeah, thanks. And you do it in that way, and then you can escalate if you catch them multiple times. You go down different routes. But I think the communication and how to talk to people is a big, big part.
Yeah, it's a huge thing.
Safety.
Yeah, and nearly every business I go to has just failed to do that. So they'll do the IOSH managing safety training, but they actually haven't given anyone any leadership training in the last 10 to 15 years or so. And as soon as you start to teach people some real simple tricks, like I teach them a real simple thing. I've got a few simple ones. I teach them, can I count on you? That's one of my little favourite tricks. So I ask people, can I count on you to wear your safety glasses? And they'll say yes. And all of a sudden, instead of just saying, well, would you mind wearing them? Can I ask you to wear them? And people say, oh yeah, of course you can. It's not quite as powerful as, can I count on you to do that? Or will you promise me that you'll do that from now on? Can I rely on you to do it from now on? It forms almost like a verbal contract with people. And later, when they don't wear them, and sometimes they don't wear them afterwards, you can say to them, well, you promised me that you would wear them. I use the word you promised, because it was a promise. You said you said I could count on you to wear these glasses. Now, what's stopping you from wearing the glasses, right? And you can have like a second conversation, but you've had one, you've had two, yeah. And normally you are sorting. So how can I put it? You're preventing a lot of these issues from occurring. So once you have one conversation, that's usually enough, and you'll get a small minority of people who'll push it, and you'll need a second conversation with them. Handle both those conversations right. You'll get very few people requiring a third one, but you will get the odd one who you'll need a third conversation with, and that's like a firmer, sterner type conversation. Yeah, and there's another strategy for that. There's another strategy, and that's where I start to use the do you agree? Here's a standard. It says, do you agree that if there's a rule, it should be followed? And if they go, whoa, it says, no. Do you agree that everyone in this business should follow all of the rules from the very top to the very bottom? Do you agree that that would be a fair and right thing to do? And they'll go, yes. Instantly, you're nodding. You're nodding, and I'm not even addressing it to you. It's like, yes. It says, right, right. So you were getting to agree to a standard. It says, right, and would you agree that in our company policy and on that sign and in the handbook, it says here that everyone must wear the safety glasses in this area at all times? And they're going to go, yes, right? And so that's part of the strategy for that kind of ultimate conversation, which is the one that you're having just before you go into a disciplinary investigation. You're trying to stop them from escalating further into disciplinary. So there's little things like that, and there's the and but technique. I don't know if you're aware of this one, but a lot of people disagree with the word but. They'll say, yeah, I agree with that. You'll see it on LinkedIn. Look out for it on LinkedIn now. In the comments, they'll go, yeah, I agree with that, but. And the problem with that is that they're saying, yeah, I don't actually agree at all. Now they're saying, yeah, okay, I agree, but let's delete that agreement. Let's ignore that and focus on this one thing I'm about to say here, which is in complete disagreement to everything you just said. And so the word but, I mean, it sounds kind of physical already. It's like, sounds like it's what they call an onomatopoeic sound. It sounds like a punch, but, headbutt. So straight away, it sounds a bit conflictual. And then it distracts all of the attention onto the thing that where you're disagreeing. And I just teach people a real simple technique. I say, well, say that you agree, and instead of saying but, say and. It sounds smoother, and it doesn't distract the attention from what you say. You can say, yeah, I really agree with that. I agree with this bit and that bit and that bit. And I think there's one thing I would add to all of that, and it would be this. And all of a sudden, it doesn't really sound like you're disagreeing. You are disagreeing, but you're disagreeing in a way that sounds agreeable. And it takes a lot of the conflict. And what you find is that you want to transform conversations away from these arguments where everyone just focuses on the one little thing that they can agree on 90%, but they're focused on the disagreement, and you'll have the whole conversation just on this one little detail. Whereas actually you want to be focusing on the things you agree with, and maybe you can work with that and act on that and use that to drive the organization forward. And you don't want this little thing to take on a life of its own, so you can exit a conversation, feel like, yeah, it was a really good meeting, it's really productive, we agreed on a lot, we've got a few details to sort out. That's much more constructive than exiting a meeting with, bloody hell, it's like, oh, we couldn't get agreement on this, yeah. And it's just little things like that. And when people start to practice saying and instead of but, it really does change lives. It really does. I use it all the time. Hardly ever say.
No, I do. I like that one. I like that. I'd call them. So there are people out there who will just but you with everything.
Yeah.
No matter what you say. As a quick example, I went to a site that makes sausages that you will find in Tesco's and everywhere, and it was about the stacking of the height of them, and the union was involved. And sometimes I find union in one of two ways: they're either very, very good and on your side and want the same for their members, or because whatever somebody said, they're just going to say the opposite because that's what they do, because that's what union do, and that's the old 60s, 70s. And we started out about the stacking height of these sausages, and every time I gave an answer, and I was amusing myself more with this than anything else. So we went off to there, and I gave the answer and went, right, we can do it this way, and we can do that, and then here it goes, because it's happening over there, and they've agreed, so that's what we'll do. The other answer to that would be this. And she was like, oh, okay. Yeah, but look at these signs here. And these signs aren't in the way. And I knew I've gone from the height of stacking sausages, we went all the way through. I thought, I'm gonna try and butter to death. And she went all the way through to the amount of money that they don't get paid, the lack of holidays, and not enough sick pay. And what else was there? There was someone else about like not recruiting enough staff and the induction. And I was like, oh my days, I couldn't, no matter what. We've gone from stacking sausages to not enough pay.
So she used it as an opportunity to start ranting about everything that was wrong with the organisation. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just, and she just butted everything. Even though I gave her an answer.
Yeah, that's from Little Britain. What was the name of that? Yeah, but no, but yeah, but no, but yeah.
Yeah, but.
Well, yeah, unions can be like that. I've known some really good union people who were very constructive and worked with management, worked with workers. They were solution focused, and then you do get the kind of the 1960s dinosaurs who are motivated more by an animus against management. It's more resentful. I don't like them because they're in charge and they pull the strings. And I've known one guy. He was actually an old boss of mine. I really liked him. In fact, this is going to sound really critical of him, but I really liked him and respected him. But he used to tell some stories of his old shop steward days, and he used to tell these stories as if they were funny. And he used to kind of brag about how he handled this manager and what he did. And he used to end that story with me saying, he said, "It sounds like you were a bit of a bully. You were walking into people's offices without knocking, sitting down in their chair, plomping things on the table, using manipulative language, having a go at them." And I said, "Sounds like a bullying tactic." He said, "Oh, it's not bullying. You can't bully them. They're management." And I was like, "No, it sounds very conflictual." And that's just never worked for me with trade union people. But the only way of handling those people I've often found is to try to agree with them as much as you can, to try and take out some of the sting. So if they've got some valid issues, and say, I see where you're coming from. It's a valid issue. So if I were in your shoes, I would feel strongly about that as well. And I really would like to fix that for you. If I could wave a magic wand and fix all of that, and I can't. I'm only the health and safety trainer, and all I'm here to do today is talk about this. And then you can ask them, can I count on you to contribute to this session and see if we can move this one little problem forward? Yeah, and usually you'll get a yes there. Yeah, sure, we'll focus just on this one thing. Yes, okay, right, just crack on.
Yeah, and I think sometimes they don't get the communication. So a couple of examples with union is I went to one site and I saw a thing on the board, and it was all the names of the guys, and it was all coloured in different colours. And I was like, "What's this?" And they went, "This is when you are taking your sick days." And I went, "What?" He went, "Yeah, the union's drawn up a plan because you're entitled to 7 days sick, paid sick. Now, not everybody takes this 7 days sick. So if you haven't taken them, it's now assigned, and the union take control of who's having their sick days." And I was like, "What?" So it's like it was.
So sick days are holiday days.
Pretty much, and they organised it so you couldn't argue it. But another one was an interesting one. Again, I can't name the company. Is we were going to go in and we were going to do the manual handling training for them. But what happened is they got told that this external company were coming in to do the manual handling. So as we were going to go and do the manual handling, was like, right, okay. They heard that this other company were going to come in and do all the training that the union do. Now, the union are the trainers, or the union leaders or members are the trainers for that site or that company. And they thought that they were going to lose their job as trainers. And they all kicked off massively until we had the meeting. And I went, "Well, where have you got that from? That's not what's happening. What we're going to do is we're going to improve on what you do. Let's have a look at what you do." And it's exactly what you just said. Let's have a look at what you do. "Oh, that video is actually not that bad, but can you see how they're pulling across the body to pull them down? How they're standing there with their feet bent at the waist? Have you seen it?" And they were like, I said, "So you're going to still do all the training, guys. We're just here to improve upon what you've done. And how old is this stuff you've got here?" And they were like, "Oh, it's 8 years old." They went, "Yeah, we have been saying it needs." So won them over, really. But because they hadn't been told the correct things, what was happening, they automatically thought that they were going to lose their work, and then kicked off, and it started a whole like couple of months of real rough times between management and union because they misunderstood.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that there's often a lot of baggage in these places, isn't there? I've often seen that management have changed, and management have a very different attitudes to the management from before, or the management from, say, 20 years ago. But some of the old timers on the shop floor have become so cynical and jaded with times because they've been so disappointed with previous managements that they just assume that the new team are going to be just as bad as the old team. And so then the new management team are trying to win these guys over, trying to get them to contribute, they're trying to engage, we're trying to collaborate. And the old timers then become the problem. They become kind of their own enemy because they're like, "Yeah, it'll never happen. We've had that idea before. This was promised before," and before you know it, this new management team themselves just become angry and jaded and resentful at the shop's floor staff. I've seen that in so many places where the people have just given up on the shop floor, and then when there's an opportunity to actually make a difference because you've got a new person in charge, so they just ruin it. Let's talk about training providers. Have you worked for any other training providers in your time when you first started out?
I did work for one, yes, and that sort of what caused me to leave, really, because they were, you know, that tick box that I talked about going in, doing the bare minimum. People are left to their own devices. Nobody ever checked upon any of the instructors or the trainers, and that's why I went. We could do so much better. And do you know what? I don't think that what we do is outstanding. I just think it's of the level it should be. So it's just good. Where there's so many others out there that are below standard and below par, and doing that tick box.
Yeah, so the idea is that you don't necessarily think you're that good. You're at the level that should be expected. I mean, I would say you are outstanding, but it's a different frame of reference. I would say that you're outstanding compared to the ones who are just teaching how to lift boxes in the workplace. But you're just saying, well, our standard, our internal standard is just higher, and we're not outstanding compared to that. We're just meeting our own higher standards. Yeah, I did a lot of subcontracting when I first started out. I subcontracted for most of the big IOSH, NEBOSH course providers. I was fortunate enough to get sent to Africa. I went to Madagascar, I went to Mauritius, did a bit of North Africa, delivering courses in French because I speak French. Travelled all around the UK as well, and I found first of all is that the slides they send you with are usually pretty poor. They usually just send you some bullet point slides, very few images, you know, very kind of PowerPoint text heavy type stuff. I remember being sent to do a NEBOSH General Certificate course, and they'd purchased the slides from, who was it? Was it RMS? RMS, they're one of the big publishers, but they'd purchased these slides for like £1,000 or something. And we had something like 1,200 slides to deliver. And each slide was just rammed full of text. Just the whole thing, bullet points, huge amounts of text, very few pictures. And then I got the RMS book for the NEBOSH course, and it was the same. They basically copied and pasted large chunks into the PowerPoint. And then the course provider just bought all of this and just sent me to deliver a course with this. And here are our materials, got our logo on it. Off you go, kid. And yeah, I mean, I did my best with it, and you know, most of the people passed on the course, but bloody hell, it was hard work. I mean, we got to a point where we were just throwing away the slides. Yeah, and it was kind of embarrassing. I just felt embarrassed to be in that position. I was trying to do great customer service and do a great course because I feel embarrassed if I don't. But at the same time, I've been given these resources to use, and at the end of it, it was like, well, I can't defend this anymore, so let's just get rid of it. And let's just start making our own stuff on the hoof. You know, we're doing mind maps and lists and case studies and stuff like that. We just winged it. And I found that's actually pretty typical of a lot of companies. One company I worked with, because I'm quite good at what I do, I slightly increased my price by 25 quid. The going rate, and I think it still is the going rate, it's about 300 quid a day for IOSH, for NEBOSH training. And it hasn't gone up in years, but I increased it to 325, and all of a sudden, stopped getting work from that company. It's just stopped getting work, even though my pass rates are excellent, and they told me, oh, your pass rates are better than anyone else. Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, up to 325, gone. They just gave it to another trainer.
That is so shocking. And I see there's we had one of our first aid trainers. He was doing our first aid, and he knew our manual handling, but he wasn't one of our manual handling trainers, but he knew what we did like you do. And I said, oh, what are you up to next week then, John? And he said, oh, I'm doing some manual handling. I went, oh, okay. He said, oh, and it's not your stuff, trust me. He said, it's for a rail company, and they were paying him ridiculously low as well. And he goes, they're not interested. He said, the bloke said to me, he said, have you done manual handling before? He went, well, I've done a course. He goes, here's the PowerPoint, here's the slide, and here's all the paperwork. And all it was cardboard box training for guys who work on the railway. And he said, all it is they're only interested in the paperwork. He said, they're not interested in what quality I deliver or anything like that. And he said, and I don't know what they're paying him, but they were paying him. They were paying John, I think they said 125 quid a day for his course. Okay. And it was supposed to be 6 hours. And I went, John, 6 hours? He goes, I know. He said, I don't even know I make it last 6 hours. He said, we just sit around having brews and stuff. But the bloke that gives me the work, all he wants at the end of the day is the paperwork.
Yeah. Now you said that you don't charge as much as other people. But why is that? Because you're better than them and you give better value. So why don't you charge more?
Because I feel guilty, because I want to help people and I want people to stay safe. I'm a giver, Will. I like to save people. There's givers and takers in the world, and I'm not saying that we are. Depends how you look at it as well. Because obviously, you could go. If I give you a couple of numbers, you could go online and you could do a £30 per person, sit there, manual handling course, and go da 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 da. Yeah, that's me. I'm now qualified online. But an in-person, tailor-made, bespoke course has come in at about £40 a person. So when I'm saying we don't charge that much, is that much? Is it that expensive? To say that we don't charge expenses, so we have one price and we charge that one rate, and that's all we do, no matter where you are in the country. So we don't. I do know other companies who charge expenses at 45p a mile. And from door to door, and then charge a minimum of £100 per night, and then ask their instructors to go from home. Or they say if it's within 50 miles, you then will drive to the job and drive back. But they charge the company from their location, which may be another couple of 100 miles away, and charge an overnight.
I see.
So ripping companies off, and
I see. Yeah.
And I hated that.
Yeah, that does seem like a little bit of a rip-off. I mean, if you're going to charge for the travel expenses, just make the travel expenses real.
Yeah, and this is, and it could be for some of the courses. I mean, some people challenged it. Is the expenses can be as much as the training, but they just
it can be, yeah, it can be, yeah. Certainly once you start to hit, some of the hotel costs and 45p a mile.
Yeah, nowadays hotels have gone crazy these days, haven't they?
Yeah, they can. I mean, ultimately, you can either charge separately for the travel expenses, or you have to build it into your price, but it has to be paid for somehow, in some way, So, me personally, I tend to charge for it separately. I've tried a bit of both. I don't think it really makes that much difference, to be honest. People do tend to look at the total price. But I find that if you're delivering a great service, I think people are quite happy to pay a bit more. You get what you pay for ultimately. People know that. There's always someone who can be cheaper. And I find that psychologically, when you're cheaper than other people, people wonder why as well. Because people know that you get what you pay for. It's like, well, why is he so cheap? Why is she so cheap? I mean, you also get the opposite. It's like, well, why is he so expensive?
Do you see at the moment, I see it a few times and I can sort of see right through it, is people going, IOSH course, £250 per person this week, limited places available. And I'm like, you're desperate.
Yeah, well, the places are limited. I'm sure they are, but there are plenty of them at the moment.
Yes. And you're going, right, that's usually the sort of one-man bands that were trying to drum up some business. And I get it, it's a hard time. It can be a hard time at the moment in
well, it's a tough gig, that one. It's a gig that I'm not in at all. It doesn't interest me. It's just such hard work to have open courses, because you've got to, let's say you're allowed 20 people on an IOSH course max, but you need about 10 really to make any decent money, and that's 10 sales. You've got to get 10 different sales, 10 different people you've got to speak to. It's 10 different sales you've got to close. It's 10 different purchase orders, 10 different invoices. And each one of those can just fall apart at any time. Yeah, and that's why I've never done open courses, because you've got to advertise them, promote them, you've got to get a venue, you've got to sell to all of these different people. And I know there's business to be made, because loads of companies do that kind of thing. But for me, I just prefer to do in-house training. I've got one customer. I charge one price. You send as many people onto the course as you like, up to a certain limit. If you send me 3, well, it's going to be very expensive per person. Send me 20, then you have excellent value for money. They have a venue, and so it just makes it so for me and I am almost a one-man band. We've got a very small team, and I started as a one-man band. It was just so much easier. Just go for the in-house stuff, and the in-house stuff you tailor it, because if you're going to do an open course, it's just a generic course, isn't it? With the generic slides, because you've got one person from a theatre, one person from a factory, one person from the council. And it's like, well, you've got to do a kind of generic course and wing it to try and make it relevant to everyone. But let's say if I get sent to BP or to Cranswick Foods, or to Smith and Nephew, or British Steel, or whoever my client is. And so now we can tailor it to your industry. We can use case studies from your industry. Yeah, and that makes a much more interesting course as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, absolutely. And that, I mean, when I said per person with the manual handling, we don't charge per person. We do exactly the same as you. This is the price for up to this many people, and that's it.
Right.
So if you send 2 people on, we'll still run the course exactly the same. But I just did one
the
last
costs
week.
to you are the same, aren't they?
Well, yeah, exactly. And if they're smart, and we go, look, we're going to do 2 manual handling courses in a day for up to 12 people, 9 till 12, 1 till 4. That's 24 people you can get in a day, if you're smart about it, and that's where you make your savings. But you're right. I did an IOSH course last week, and it was to a group of facility managers. So all we talked about was the difficulties that facility managers have when they've got their subcontractors coming on site. And that's really good for them, because we're now making it bespoke without them knowing it, only because I know facility management. And I think that got them to get the buy-in as to what we're talking about. Oh, tell me your story about that. And when you've been around a little bit, you know what they're talking about, and then you can offer a suggestion. But if you've got all these people from all these different companies, how on earth are you going to tailor it? It's just not doable.
It does become very difficult. Yeah, now there is a benefit to what, in one sense, is that you'll often get people chipping in with their own experience, which is very different from everyone else's in the room. And there is some value to that. You know, the people do learn kind of from each other, and they realize that even though they're in very different industries, they often have the same problems. And the problems are, you know, we've got limited time, limited resources, limited equipment, limited skills. You know, management are not the best. You know, the staff are not the best. And they think, oh, it's funny, isn't it? It's like, you know, working in financial services is actually kind of similar to working in construction to some extent.
I always find no matter where I go, because you're like me, you're going in at the middle, and all the management do is complain about how bad the staff are and how lazy they are, and then all the staff do is complain about how the management are lazy, sat up there drinking brews, not doing any work. But actually, the truth is, neither of them would be doing anything if it wasn't for the other half. It's just that perception. It's the optics.
It is the optics, yeah. And a big part of my training is I try and teach them a bit of humility as well. I encourage them to be humble. You know, I try and raise awareness of the fact that if they were in the other side's shoes, then they wouldn't do a better job. And vice versa. I tell management the same thing. It says, you know, if you worked on the front line for just like a day, you'd find it really hard, physically very tiring. Yeah, you have to be humble enough to listen to other people. I mean, the only way we can collaborate and engage and come up with win-win solutions between frontline and senior management is that if we have to be humble enough to appreciate each other's difficulties and experiences. And the front line have often got very unrealistic expectations. They think managers can just, you know, click their fingers and sort things out. But senior managers are often subject to, say, a group director, a group level director, or a group level finance, or a group level budgets that they've got. You know, they've got a boss themselves, and they can't just click fingers and sort things out. And so the front line have got this very unrealistic expectation, and the senior management are often stuck between a rock and a hard place. And their frustration is that they can't get the front line to get what needs to be done as efficiently as possible. The front line are always finding practical problems, which are real, but there's a huge amount of frustration there. So why can't you just get this damn job done? I said, well, we can't. and so there's often a failure to listen, but you know, but isn't that just the human condition to some extent? You know, we always think we're right and the other person's wrong. And you see that in everything.
Have you ever come across people who always start off with, yeah, well, I used to be a manager, and they're not a manager anymore, they're just a shop floor worker? And I go, well, why are you not a manager anymore then? Oh yeah, because they were shit, they didn't listen to me, nobody was it. I was like, was it them that were the problem, or was it you? And when someone first approaches you and they feel the need to tell you that they used to be your manager, yet they're not now because they gave it up to go ground level again, you're like, the problem with you or the problem with them? Where is it?
Yeah, and again, there needs to be some humility there, because you know, it's like, okay, basically you couldn't hack it as a manager. You weren't very good, you didn't like it, you found it too stressful, whatever the problem was. So you came back into a position where you were competent. Yeah, but so then have a bit of respect and admiration for people who might not be that good at being a manager, but they can hack it, and they're there, and they've managed to keep their job somehow. You know, we should give credit where credit is due. He says, you know, people aren't perfect. I link this to politics a lot of the time because it's very easy to criticise politicians, and Lord knows I do criticise politicians. But I wouldn't last five minutes in some of these senior political roles, not at all. I'd run away from it. But it's very easy for us to sit here and say, oh, you should do this and you should do that. It says, yeah, but you're not the one in the arena. You're not the one who's doing the doing.
And I think we all have different resiliences as well. And that's where some people are happy down there, want to do that and don't want anything more. But others want more. And to be a senior manager, you have to be quite resilient, I believe.
Yeah, you do. And resilience, I think, to some extent, is something that you learn, but it's also something that you're born with. Because resilience is partly down to personality. And personality is, to a large extent, not completely, but to a large extent, it's genetic. I find some of the psychological research on this fascinating. There's I don't know if you've ever come across the big 5 personality traits, which are kind of it's a very common way of trying to score people and their personalities. So you have essentially agreeableness, how agreeable people are, how much they like to be liked, how polite they are, that kind of thing, how easily they will comply with instructions. So you've got agreeableness, you've got, that's relevant for health and safety though, isn't it? It's like we have agreeable people who do whatever we ask, and then we have disagreeable people who tend to ask why. Why do I have to do that? Why do I have to wear my safety glasses? There's nothing that can hit me, nothing that can hurt me. Why are you asking me to do that? It doesn't make any sense. So you got those characters, and that's not their fault. They're kind of born that way. Yeah, they're kind of born that way. So instead of thinking that they're just a jumped up little upstart, we should maybe appreciate the fact that that's just the way they are. It's their character. So you've got agreeableness, you've got conscientiousness, and that is people's tidiness. There's housekeeping in there. And also their reliability and their industriousness and how hard they work and how much they want to get done, how productive they are. And there are some people who are just kind of naturally are untidy. And I know we've talked about OCD quite a bit, and there are people who are very tidy, very organized, very structured, and they're not OCD, they're just tidy. And that's conscientiousness. You've got extroversion, that's another trait, that's number 3 on there. Extroversion is it's about, are you shy or are you open? Are you open to social gatherings? Do you like talking in public? But also it's about assertiveness as well. So you'll find that people who are not extroverted don't tend to stand up for themselves when their manager, say, asks them to do something that's unsafe. If you're high in agreeableness and you're introverted, that might be a bit of a problem because you tend to roll over and say, yes, boss, I'll do that, boss. The 4th one is neuroticism. They've changed it now. They've inverted it to call it emotional stability, but I'm old-fashioned and I'll call it the old way, neuroticism. So some people are more neurotic than others. So this is very relevant to mental health and resilience, because some people are more likely to suffer negative emotions like sadness and stress and anxiety and fear and depression, and that is partly genetic. And it's also partly the result of their environment and upbringing and that kind of thing as well. But it is partly genetic. I mean, the studies on men and women are fascinating on this, because you see that women are slightly higher. They score slightly higher on average on neuroticism. And so essentially the cliche, the stereotype of women are more emotional than men is to some extent true. They don't score that much more highly, but they do a bit, which is interesting because that explains why women have more mental ill health issues than men, generally speaking. They do. There are 4 times as many women attempt suicide than men. The majority of mental health issues statistically are women. Men tend to commit suicide more successfully than women, which is another issue. But so it's and divorce, for example, divorce is predominantly initiated by women who are unhappy with their marriage, and that's a neuroticism issue. And what you find when you look at managers and leaders is that leaders tend to score low on neuroticism, because the ones who score high can't hack it. They get stressed too easily. They have the nervous breakdowns. And so that's kind of a predictor of success in management. Now, it's not to say that all leaders score low on neuroticism. These are just averages. The final one is openness to experience. And so it's people who are open to new things, new changes, open to abstract thinking. And so those people who score high on openness will be more open to changes that you make in the workplace. So you've got a new system, new piece of kit, a new solution, new procedure. Those types of people would be prepared to consider it and look at it. And some people just score low on the openness to change and tend to reject it and have to be won over gradually with time. So I find all of this fascinating and very, very relevant to what we do. And it's often combinations of things which can cause some real issues. You can have people who are say untidy because they've got low conscientiousness, but also highly disagreeable. So when you challenge their tidiness, they will snap back at you and say, well, I think it's tidy. It's tidy enough for me. What's wrong with you? Kind of thing. And when you realize just to what extent all of this is actually genetic, it's not all genetic, of course, there's a bit of nature-nurture, but it is to some extent, from our studies on twins, where twins have been separated at birth and put into different families, and we've done a lot of that, we've done a lot of that in England, Australia, and Canada. We're over the 50s, 60s, 70s, we were taking kids from families and putting them into different families, and you see that twins, identical twins, tend to have very similar personalities and have similar scores. So there's a big genetic component in all of this. And anyway, I'll just close just by saying that when I learned all of this, it just made me realize that when someone's being a dickhead, it might actually just be their genetics. and all of a sudden it's like, well, I'm not going to have a go at someone for being, say, disabled. If someone's born with legs that don't work, I'm not going to judge them for that. That's just the way they are. So if someone's a bit pig-headed and stubborn or not open to change, I have to consider the fact that maybe they were just born that way, and I have just to accept that and work with that, and I have to figure out a way of working with that person.
No, I like that because I'm one of them. The question, like, you need to wear this eye protection. Why? There's not. I went to a site the other week, and it's a HS2 site, and it's out in the middle of the countryside, and it's going to be the headquarters, and they're building it, and everything was there. Now, nothing's started yet, and they were doing like an open day to show off. Yet the guys on the security were there this is when it was hot as well, a couple of months ago, in full high-vis jackets and trousers, and they had hard hats on, and they had glasses on, and they are just checking. Can I get your name, please? And the guys were dribbling me, so I'm going, guys, why are you wearing a hard hat? You're just checking my name. I'm driving a car. There's nothing coming in and out of here. You're just telling me to go drive in that car park. Why are you wearing glasses? And he goes, we've been told to. Yeah. And that's the wrong reply. They should have a reply to me or not be wearing them.
Yeah, blanket approaches. Now, I see the value of blanket approaches. It just makes things easy to manage. Everyone just does it that way. No one has to think about it. No one makes bad decisions. But actually, sometimes the blanket approach is a bad decision. It's a fascinating one for health and safety managers to debate, that one. It's about ease of management. Because teaching people when they have to wear PPE is actually quite hard, because to get every single person to make the right decision in the right situation as to what PPE is required is very difficult to get that consistent good decision-making process throughout the whole workforce. And then you'll have a situation where a manager will look at a group of people and think, right, okay, so he's wearing a hard hat, great, he's got one. Oh, he hasn't got one. Why hasn't he got one? And then the manager has to think about it for a few seconds. And then think, oh, okay, he doesn't need one because. Okay, right. And then, so it slows down the managers a bit. But also, let's say the manager sees a person not wearing a hard hat and then thinks, oh, he should be wearing a hard hat. He'll walk over to him and start the conversation. Says, well, why are you not wearing your hard hat? The other person will go, well, I'm not wearing it because. That can be a real issue, because then it starts to create conflicts. It's like, what is the standard? The standard is subjective. This is a real problem just in life generally. Subjective standards, where everyone makes up their own bloody mind as to what is the right and proper thing to do in a certain situation. And so we have these blanket rules, and what that does is it gives us an objective standard. The standard is that, well, you might not like it, but that is the rule that we adhere to. And the problem is that we are humans, and we're imperfect and flawed. So our standards are often imperfect and flawed, and they create stupid situations like the one you described, where people are wearing hard hats and coats in their cars and dripping with sweat. Yeah,
here's one that I came across. So I was at the site. I'm wearing hearing protection, and I walked past the guy who's not wearing hearing protection, and he was the little soft foam buds. And I went, he's not wearing his hearing protection. He went, no, he's deaf. Right. Okay.
Like completely deaf.
Yes. Well,
right.
Apparently so. Well, he's classed as deaf, whether he can only sign or not. But he went, yeah, he doesn't have to wear them. He's deaf. And I was like, I think he should be wearing them, whether he's deaf or not, because I walked past and went, he's not wearing them. That mean I don't need to wear them because I didn't know about his condition. So I said, my suggestion was, I think he should wear them anyway, so there's no misunderstanding about who does, who doesn't. Exactly what you just said.
Yeah, so it sends a message, doesn't it? Yeah, that's an interesting one. I would just have that conversation with that person. Say, would you be prepared to wear them anyway?
Yeah.
Just because we have a lot of temps here, we have a lot of contractors here, and I'm just concerned that you're not wearing them because they don't know you're deaf, and they will just assume that you're not wearing them and you're flouting the rules and you're getting away with it, and therefore they can get away with it. And maybe we could come to a compromise where the person accepts, yeah, sure, I'll wear it just for show, maybe, or maybe not.
Difficult, isn't it?
It's difficult, yeah. When someone says to me, he says, well, why is he not wearing them? I said, because he's deaf. And then, oh.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I had, just talking about people with disabilities, I had a great example when I worked in financial services. We have PEEPs, personal emergency evacuation plans of how you're going to get people out of the building in the event of a fire. And so we had 1,000 people in this building. We had all office workers, call center workers, and we had a huge variety of people with different disabilities. We had blind person, we had a lady with brittle bone syndrome. We had various people with limps and things, and then we had one guy who had no legs. I never asked him why, but he had no legs, and so we had to put together a personal emergency evacuation plan. Now, our standard plan for most safety people is that you use some kind of evac equipment, evac chair, evac slide. I'm not a fan of evac chairs, but you'd use something to get him down the stairs during an evacuation. So I'm sat down with him and having this PEEP, which is basically a conversation. And I'm walking him through, this is what we would normally do as standard for someone in your situation. We already have this in place for a number of other people in the business. And he's like, you ain't getting me in one of those effing evac chairs. I was like, why not? He says, because I don't want to be sat in your evac chair. And I went, well, how do you propose that we get you out of the building if we need to? And he just went, I can get down those stairs faster than you can.
Yeah.
Now, it was awkward because, it was felt very obvious that he had no legs. He sat in a wheelchair in front of me, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I've just got to ask, how? How? You have no legs? And he was like, come on then. Let's go, I'll show you. I went, are you sure? He went, yeah. So I don't want to do anything to make you feel uncomfortable. I thought I was upsetting him. He's like, no, it's all right. I'll show you. So you feel comfortable. Let me make my own way down the stairs. I went, okay. And we got there, and he slid down a full floor from the second floor to the first floor on his bum. Faster than I could, definitely. It was. I could have run down the stairs faster than him, but he was faster than me walking at a normal pace. And he's like, yeah, I've been doing this since I was a kid.
Yeah.
Like, wow. I went, like, at this point we had a bit of rapport, and I said to him, can you get up the stairs faster than me? And he went, no, no, I can't. But he could.
Yeah.
He had pecs, he had shoulders, and he had a physique on him, and he could get up the stairs. It was like one of the characters in Toy Story, one of the toys that's being chopped to pieces by that kid. Yeah, at the end, the toys have got no legs, but it was like this big muscle guy with no legs. He was impressive. And in the end, what we agreed was that he would make his own way. He would wait for the crowd to go, So he didn't. So because he was a trip hazard, effectively, or he was like a bowling ball, and he could knock people over as he slid down.
Yeah.
So I said, let's just wait for everyone to go, and as soon as the coast is clear, because she's in a refuge, there's like an hour fire door and another hour fire door, so he was perfectly safe in the stairwell. And then he'd slide down himself, and there would be a fire warden or someone down there with an evac chair. We'd then put him in the evac chair because his wheelchair would be at on the second floor or something. We would then put him in an evac chair and wheel him to the assembly point, and he kindly agreed to do that.
And this is one of the problems. I don't want to get into the whole evac chair, we could do. Issue is somebody has their comfortable wheelchair. You have to get them from that wheelchair into the evac chair. Now, that's a manual handling issue all within itself. And not just that, is where do you touch them? Where are you allowed to? And, sometimes you've got brittle bones and someone is in a chair, you can end up breaking them and causing them damage. But to move them from their comfortable chair they're in into that evac chair is just, and there's two things that's really difficult to move. It's liquids and foods, because they all move around and they're really dense and heavy. And the other one is people. They're the three issues that I don't like tackling with manual handling, because they're excessive.
Yeah, so I was going to say, let's say you get asked by a police force to deliver some manual handling training, and they're on about moving some of the environmental protesters. I'm just wondering how you would handle that. It's like, because you like to use the real physical props. Would you actually use people as part of your training course to do that?
I've done some stuff where we were asked specifically about a unconscious casualty on an aircraft closest to the window, and how do we, as in the air stewards who aren't built for the gym, who are usually female, get that 16-stone bloke from that window down to the aisle, and then from the aisle to the galley, because the galley is where you get all the space, where all the first aid is, where you can deal with it. Now, they could be unconscious through drink, they could be unconscious through a health issue, or they could have just died, and you can't leave them in the seat. How do you do that? And we went through, we did that tailor-made thing. We went through a few scenarios, and we just got a team of 4 to work together, doing it in phases, and we managed to achieve it really easy. And we got them from the window into the aisle in 45 seconds, and that was a 16-stone block. Don't get me wrong, we used some of the sheets from first class. We then started to look to develop that with slide boards as well, because they do have slide boards anyway. You know what a slide board is, where you go from your chair into another chair if you're disabled, and you have a board that bridges that gap. So they have certain things on board. And then also, when you have the sheet, you can wrap them and encase them, so you're not handling them physically. So you because they're unconscious anyway, as you wrap it around their upper body, it holds them and gives you something to purchase on, and then you move them as a mass. But have you ever done that trick as a child, where you sit somebody on a chair and you all put your hands on the head and you push down for 30 seconds, and then all of a sudden you go 2, 3, and then everybody just goes underneath the chair with the 2 fingers and then lifts the whole chair up with the person sat on it. 4 people doing it like that. Have you ever tried that?
No, not tried that.
All right, yeah. And it's actually quite an easy thing to do. But everybody needs to work together at the same time, and then bang, and you can slide them across, supporting the head, get them into the galley. Once they're in the galley, you're just dragging them, because they're already on the sheet that you've already wrapped around them. So you just drag them up the galley then. And if they're unconscious or the bowels have let go, that also protects their modesty whilst you're doing it. So you can have one at one end, because the galley, the walkway is quite tight. So you have one at the top with the head supporting that, and then one pulling it from there, and it slides nicely along the carpet in the walkway. So there are ways of doing these things.
And the other challenge in all of that is you can't hurt the person if they're still alive.
Exactly.
You can't bang and bruise them.
You can't determine whether they're dead or alive, really. Anyway, you need a doctor to do that, don't you?
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of, what was that movie? I'm sure Arnold Schwarzenegger, doesn't he kill someone in the airline chair next to him, and then the steward comes over, and Arnold goes, he's dead tired. It's a bang.
That's the one. Well, that's Commando. That's Commando, isn't it?
Commando, yeah, that's Commando. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, he's dead tired. That was a ridiculous movie, Commando.
That's the one where at the end when he kills the guy and he goes, "Let off steam, Bennett," and he's got a big steel pulse going through his chest and steam's coming out.
Right, so you are a closet Schwarzenegger fan. We're going to have to do another one of these and talk about Schwarzenegger movies. We should do a health and safety podcast with just about Schwarzenegger movies. Or we could extend it to other types of movies as well. We could just play movie clips and then talk about the manual handling, mental health, and other health and safety issues. There was one last thing we wanted to talk about on our list, and that was the cost of training versus the cost of accidents. Now, I've already suggested that perhaps you should charge more. I opened this conversation by asking you about whether your manual handling training has actually led to a reduction in injuries. And you gave me an example of somewhere at an airport where you had a 65% reduction in sickness absence from the tasks that you trained people on. So that's a big quantifiable benefit. And yet you said, well, we don't charge as much as some others when the training you provide is far superior in almost every way. So I'm just thinking, it's like, well, the cost of your training is a fraction of the cost of an accident. How much is a manual handling injury?
So these days, if somebody injures themselves and they go, right, no win, no fee, I'm going to go to court, to defend it from the business side will cost you around about £9,000, £9,000 to £12,000 in legal fees to defend it. So if the individual is saying, I want £5,000 for my bad neck or my shoulder that I injured, the business can look at it and the business will go, right, it's a minimum of 9 and he only wants 5, so there's a saving of 4 to be had. You may as well pay it. And that's what the legal people do. Yeah. So that's how they pretty much look at it at the moment. But there was a case I went up to Liverpool. I'm not going to stereotype, but people in Liverpool can be a little bit dodgy, a little bit where, play the rules and the games type people. And there was a guy there who
stereotypes there.
No stereotyping. They're all very funny. I love them. But they know how to play the rules sometimes. And what happens is, this guy had a claim every year for 3 years, and the first year he knew the threshold, as it's called, was £5,000. Anything more than 5 will challenge, anything less than 5 will do it. And he'd done it over 3 years, so he like 4, 8, 12, and they could see it carrying on. Then they went, right, we're going to challenge him, we're going to get him in, we're going to have an external company come in, do a root cause analysis as to what the training he had, make sure the training was right, our process that we go through when we do the training, the DVD, and then the fact that what he did when he claims that he hurt himself, what position was he in? So if he was in one that wasn't trained and one we've said don't do, then we're going to say, well, we're not paying you, and we'll challenge it. And quite often, when you've got something quite robust in place, like we do, the no win, no fee lawyers think they're challenging cardboard box lifting. But if you're saying this was a bin man and he was moving 1,100 to the big wheelie bins, and he would often grab them. When I said to him, what were you doing? Show me how you do this. And he went and grabbed it like that and then started to pull. And I went, right, well, just stop right there. That's definitely not what's on the video. That's definitely not what you've been training. And if you look at your position, you're in a twisted position. Just stay there a second. Click. Caught you. And then we send all the report back to he was doing what he was not taught to.
Yeah.
And here's the solicitor, here's the training, here's the risk assessment, here's the video that he had, and here's copies of his training and retraining, yet he still chose to go against it. Now the guy went to court with it as well. They still challenged it and the company went there. He got £100 for his day out. But what was more invaluable than that is he went back to the site and he went, well, that wasn't worth it, was it? Because he'd have to take quite a few days off to go to see his solicitors, see the lawyers, and to do all that. And then,
so the company was found liable, but there was so much contributory negligence in what he did that actually he got very little money at all.
Yeah,
and it just wasn't worth it.
But as you know what the iceberg is. The iceberg is for every £1 that you spend on safety and safety training, you'll get £8 back. That's the stats that go out there, isn't it? So
yeah, I mean, well, this thing, where do these stats come from and how valid are they? I don't know. I'm not familiar with the background of that. I know the HSE have got that old iceberg, and it's from 1996, so it may be out of date now. But they reckon for every pound that is every pound that is insured, it's about the costs of accidents. For every pound that is insured, there's somewhere between 8 and 36 pounds which are not insured and just come straight off the bottom line, and that's usually things like time and damage and clean up and investigation time and maybe sick pay which isn't insured sometimes, and overtime to catch back lost time, and damage to reputation, maybe loss of sales, and so on. But yeah, there's definitely an iceberg there. Which so coming back to the point I made before is like, listen, if your manual handling training does result in a reduction of injuries, it's like, why not charge more?
I think one of the difficulties that you will have, the same as me, is how do you quantify safety and what it's saving you? The only time you know is when there was a company, a big building company, now what name them, a big building company who we were working with, who had very, very few accidents, a very good health and safety approach. And then one of their bosses went, why are we spending all this money on health and safety? We're not having any accidents. So they cut a lot of the jobs, cut a lot of the training, and put it onto every 3 years rather than annually. And then they had a death on site. And the cost of that death is obviously, first of all, you have to pay for the person that died and their family. And then the laws come in after you as well. But also, people don't want to work for you. You don't want to get contracts. And if you're getting government contracts and you've lost... you've lost a person on site. Well, they're tendering, really?
Yeah.
So they went
especially
down
in the building trade. Yeah.
Yeah.
Safety is a big part of the tendering process.
Absolutely. So it's difficult to quantify it. And you said it earlier. Why would I want your manual handling training when I've not got any musculoskeletal injuries? And I did go to a site that were moving milk. Again, I won't name it. And what they were doing is they were grabbing a load of trolleys, and the trolley is 200 kilos full of milk, and they have a second one. So they were grabbing them both, and they were moving them over to the trailer in this position, and that's what they were doing. And I was on site when the HSE ergonomics expert was there, and the manager of the site said, I don't know why you're here. I don't know why you're bothering, because we have nobody complaining about injuries from this particular task. You've come on to look at this task, yet we're not having it. And he went, okay, fine, fair enough. So he went down, the ergonomics expert went down, he did something called body mapping. So he had a picture of like a human like this. And he went to the guys doing the job. He goes, do you, during the day or after you finished, feel any discomfort anywhere in your body? And if he said yes, he said, could you do an X on my picture for me? Shoulder, upper back, neck, shoulder. So he went back to the office later on, and the guy was, the HC guy said, do you know earlier when you were saying you have no issues? This is the result of me asking your staff. So just because you don't have it now doesn't mean you're going to get it later on. And if they're all complaining about it, just because they're not telling you, your injuries are not telling you that you've got your injuries aren't telling you you've got a problem. This is telling you you're storing up a potential problem. So prevention is better than cure. Would you agree? And he was like, just like went back into his cave.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, people often assume that if they haven't got any accidents or any injuries, then legally they're compliant. But that's not at all the case, because the Health and Safety at Work Act doesn't say you must prevent all injuries and accidents. It just says you have to do everything reasonable to ensure people's health, safety and welfare. And so you could have a situation where things are very high risk or medium risk and not legally compliant, and people have not had any injuries, and the HSE can still go for you. I mean, if you just go through their news releases, or just on the BBC News website, for example, or on the SHB magazine or whatever, and you'll find loads of examples of the HSE taking action against companies when no one was hurt, no one was harmed. Yeah, and even on the mental health thing, it's like the HSE have not yet figured out how to enforce mental health and stress and so on, but they do occasionally serve improvement notices for a lack of a stress policy, or the lack of a stress risk assessment. And again, no one's necessarily complained to the HSE about stress, but the law requires you do everything reasonable. Is it reasonable to have a policy on stress? Yeah, well, yes, it is. So, right, have you got one? No, right. Breach of the law then. Improvement notice comes out. And so, whenever managers say to me, so we've never had an accident like this, therefore there's no problem. I'm like, well, no, actually, I can see that the way you're handling stuff is not safe because of the twisting, because of the reaching, because of the height, and so on. It's like, it doesn't matter whether you're having accidents or not. It's not legally compliant. It's only a matter of time. Another thing is statistics. It's like, well, if it's a small to medium-sized firm, let's say you've only got 100 people on site, so well, statistically, you're not that likely to have lots of accidents. You could go months and months and months without any accidents on a low to medium risk site with only 100 staff. Yeah, but if you have the same situation with, say, 10,000 staff, statistically, you're going to start to see people having those accidents. I mean, let's face it, we all became statistical experts during the COVID pandemic, didn't we? So I think we've got some awareness now of how a very, very small chance of something bad happening over a large number of people, you can actually see quite a lot of harm occurring.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the things, it's never happened, so why would it ever happen now? Or what are you going to do? Wait till someone has a life-changing injury before you change it? Or only up your policy once something's happened? That's being reactive rather than proactive. Me and you, I think, are in the proactive game.
Yes, we are. Well, training is supposed to be proactive, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, one of my past employers, I won't mention the name, but I worked there a long, long time ago, and they're quite an old business. They've been around since the 60s, and I warned them many years ago that one day they would have a fatality. It was a big, big place, and said one day you are going to have a fatality. It's inevitable over a long enough period of time. My guess, it'll be a forklift. And years later, it was about 10 years after that, they had that forklift death. I wasn't there, thank goodness, but a forklift went over some poor guy's head.
Right.
In fairness, from everything I've read online about it, in fairness, it doesn't actually sound like it was their fault. But it's funny, isn't it? Since that happened, barriers have gone up around the walkways. Everyone now wears high vis, whereas before, no one wore high vis because it was, certainly when I was there, no one wore high vis because it was just too expensive. 1,000 people, £20 per person. We're not doing that. Replacing it every 6 months. Yeah, so it's funny, isn't it? People think, oh, it'll never happen to us, and then one day it does, and then you end up doing all of the things that you were trying to wriggle out of doing. It's like, it doesn't save you any money in the long run. You may as well just get it done today.
What was it? There was a saying the other day, and I read it, and it said, if you think safety's expensive, try having an accident. It's not what safety saves you. No, it's not what safety costs you. It's what it saves you. But again, we need to quantify that to the people who are the bean counters. I'm not a big fan of working with reactive companies. I much rather prefer the proactive companies, because actually what we do as well is a lot better received, because they understand that what they're being given or what's coming to them is for their own benefit. So you've already won the staff over rather than trying to win the staff over.
Yeah. Well, certainly, I mean, I see huge differences between some of my customers. Some of my customers, they've got some great cultures and I'm brought in to reinforce it. Others, it's pretty dire, and I'm brought in by a fairly junior health and safety person to do a small number of training sessions because he or she's trying to change the culture of the organisation. But you can tell sometimes with these junior safety people, especially ones who are a bit green, a bit inexperienced, is that they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. They know that things have got to improve, but for whatever reason, they can't get the buy-in either from management or from the staff or from the frontline management. Often it's the frontline management who are the problem, and so you're training people, but you're not training the people who need to be trained. So there was a company I worked with some years ago. They had a fatality. They were in Hull, and this engineer got crushed against a roof beam, and if I remember correctly, he wasn't found until the next day either. Again, it didn't result in a HSE prosecution, so ultimately I don't think it was really their fault. But when I went there and visited,
was he in a mute?
No, he was on a overhead crane.
Okay.
And he was leaning over a barrier, and he was a tall guy. So if it were me, I probably would have been. So I'm 5'7", so I'm a bit shorter. I would have kind of put my head in between the guardrails. And what he was doing, he was inching the crane back and forth, observing the movement and to see if something was catching. him being quite a tall guy, he was leaning over the top guardrail, and he hadn't become aware of just how close he was to the roof beam, and there was the gap between the top guardrail and the roof beam was very narrow. And so he didn't realise how close he'd come to it. And so as he reversed, he got caught, and then the crane just carried on briefly. So it's about a 6-inch stopping time when you let go of it. It's a 20-ton crane, you know, or I don't know how, it was a big crane. And so it doesn't stop instantly, so it carries on going. And you can just imagine he just kind of caught himself, let go, but it carried on and probably suffocated him or crushed him on the spot. We don't know. I don't know. But I was brought in to help resolve that, and I got a huge amount of resistance from the new engineering manager on the new risk assessment process. So I was doing a little bit of consultancy back then, and they'd asked me to create a risk assessment process, particularly a dynamic risk assessment process. And in the end, this new engineering manager was like, "No, we're not doing that. It's too burdensome. It's too onerous. We're not having people do a risk assessment for every job before they do it." And I said, "Well, I'm fine with that, but in that case, you're going to have to risk assess. You're going to have some risk assessments for your engineering team, because at the moment you haven't got any risk assessments for any of your jobs. So you either crack on and get this stuff risk assessed like this month, or as an interim at least, you just get every engineer to do some risk assessment of the task before they do it." And that could be a temporary solution. It's like, no, not having any of it. And I walked away from that. But then later, about a year later, they asked me to deliver some IOSH managing safety training to the engineering team. And I thought, that's interesting. Just the engineers. Just the engineers. And so it sounds to me like the engineering manager needed some training. I also met the general manager there as well, and who didn't seem to be that committed. Just got a vibe, you know. I got a vibe that standards were low, and had been low for a long time. You could tell just visually standards were low, and they were tolerating it. And so they asked me to do IOSH managing safety training, and they said, "Oh, we've seen your online video e-learning, and that would be great because we're struggling to release people. You know, we can only release like 4 people for a course." And we're like, "Okay, we'll forget it anyway. But we'd love to do your video e-learning training, but," and this was the killer thing, it says, "but we don't think we've got the discipline to ensure people complete it." And I thought, if you haven't got the discipline to make sure that people complete an e-learning course, what makes you think you're going to have the discipline to ensure that your engineers work safely on a day-to-day basis? Sounds to me like the issue isn't the lack of training in the engineering team. The issue is the lack of management capability a little bit higher up. So I just responded with, if you've got a lack of a discipline, that's a lack of managerial competence. So I suggest that let's start at the top. Let's do an IOSH leading safety course. Let's do some management development, some leadership development. We'll spend some time on that, and then we'll get your standards right, your attitude right, your management approach right, and then we can train the engineering team. Because at the moment, just training the engineers to work safely when you don't have the capability of making sure they work safely, what's the point? They never, well, maybe I wasn't very diplomatic, maybe I was a bit too blunt, I don't know, but they never came back to me with that, and good riddance as far as I was concerned. It's like,
because they're looking for you to put your name against it. They're looking for an escape clause out of anything else that goes wrong. Yeah. Well, Will's done this, and that'll be the first name off their lips. And I know there's a lot of companies out there who employ health and safety managers, supervisors, team leaders, whatever, as scapegoats, because the CEO doesn't think that they are responsible, because now they've passed all that responsibility onto this person, when actually it's not that person's at all. And that's where you need the managing, not managing. What's the top one? The IOSH one.
Leading safely.
Leading safely. They need to understand the leading safely as to where their responsibilities are, and they don't often.
Yeah, well, but again, it goes back to the conversation we had earlier about management competence. It's like you can give them a managing safely course, but that doesn't give them the management skills. You just give them some awareness, you go through some case studies, you do a bit of action planning. It's a great little course, but it's only 4.5 hours. You know, so you're not going to transform people as leaders in that session. You know, what we often do is that we do that, and then we do a load of other stuff as well, in addition to, you know, because a lot of it's just down to mindset and outlook. and your moral approach. And you're trying to turn people from being autocratic to a bit more democratic and being a bit more collaborative and seeking win-wins. You know, and you just don't get that on an IOSH leading safety course. And that's not a criticism of the course itself. It's like a lot of people, I saw someone on LinkedIn the other day having a go at NEBOSH, said, oh, there's nothing about people skills in NEBOSH. And I'm like, yeah, well, there shouldn't be. Shouldn't be. They're a health and safety awarding body. They're not a persuasion, psychology, influencing skills awarding body. You want those skills, you go to somewhere else. It's like, I know those are like core health and safety skills, and it's part of the kind of the blueprint for a competent health and safety person, but you don't have to go to IOSH for every course that you need to do, you know? It's like you can go get your management skills from somewhere else, and that's absolutely fine. Yeah, it's like, because, well, you know, if you're not careful, these courses can snowball into something. They can snowball away from leading safely into just leading. You know, and it's like, well, you want to chuck in the HR stuff?
Yeah.
Do you want to chuck in the time management stuff? I mean, a lot of the time, it's like people don't know how to use emails. I was teaching one of my team the other day how to use emails.
Really?
Yeah, it's like, well, how do you sort your email? How do you manage your inbox properly? How do you use tasks? You know, there's a whole strategy there. You know, and the problem was he uses a MacBook, and Macs and Apples, they've got this terrible feature, and Google does it as well, where they bundle all the relevant emails into a group, which is kind of useful when you're trying to find all of the emails relevant to a particular topic. But the problem was there was firing of emails with attachments over a very short space of time, and they're all bundled into this one group of emails, and there was one that was missing. Well, not missing. It was hidden. It was like in a massive bundle of emails with this key attachment, and he'd missed it. And it was like, when I looked at it, I was like, yeah, okay, well, that's why you missed it. So go into your settings and turn that off. So every email comes through as a separate email. And therefore, it goes, bing, you don't miss it. There you go, there it is, unread. Open it.
Yeah.
And it's just some basic stuff like that. I mean, I did a lot of time management training when I was at Smith & Nephew years ago, just teaching me how to use Outlook properly. There's an email, there's a task, there's a diary, you know, setting deadlines for stuff, getting to inbox 0, sorting out folders. Yeah, and everyone has so many different ways. And all of this is relevant to safety, because if you're crap at managing your emails and your diary and your tasks, then chances are you're going to miss some of the safety stuff.
Absolutely. Completely agree.
But it's like, do you have time to teach that on a course? No. This is like just general management development stuff.
And I think sometimes the more you give people, the more they're going to come back to you and rely on you, and the more they're going to want to know more things. But actually, this is what we do, that and that. That's it. You know, we don't have to go into all this, because you've got to start thinking and working things out for yourself at times, you know, and trying things. And just because it works for me doesn't mean it's going to work for you as well. You know, we have one that works on a Mac, and I work on Windows. I've never had Apple, don't like Apple. All I hear is people who are loyal to Apple, but then they go, oh, it's Apple, I can't believe it's doing this. Oh, it won't do that. Why won't it do? Why have it then? And I think it's only 20% of computer users are Apple as well, but they're loyal to the death.
Yeah, well, it's tribalistic, isn't it? It's about like NEBOSH and NCRQ. People are loyal to their particular tribe.